Hey, this is Taylor Goldsmith, and you're listening to Walking the Floor.
I'm walking the floor over you.
Walking the floor.
I'm walking the floor. Walking the floor over you.
Hola, senores and senoritas, and welcome to another edition of Walking the Floor. I am your host, Chris Shiplet, and I have a wonderful podcast for you here today. Wonderful. I'm talking to Taylor Goldsmith from Dawes. You love Dawes, and he's a great conversationalist, so I think you're going to dig it. But first, let me remind you about my gigs. By the time you hear this, I will have already played Revo Surf Shop in Ventura. That's actually happening tonight, because I'm taping this on a Thursday, but you're not going to hear it till a Monday. It's confusing. It's like you're listening to somebody in a time machine. I got one of the details wrong about this gig, which by the time you hear this, if you actually showed up, you will know that it was not free. It's $15. And that means that next week on December 9th in Camarillo at Revo Surf Shop with my good friend Timmy Curran, it's also $15. But for that $15, you get a surf movie, and you get live performances by me and my man Timmy Curran. And I think kids are free. Kids are free. So let's just pretend last week I was just talking to the kids. And then also, moving on a little later in the month, December 18th, I'm going to be opening for Punk Rock Legends X at the Casbah down in San Diego, and I love the Casbah. That's going to be a great show. Great show. I've had a lot of fun shows at the Casbah over the years, and this time I'm going to be opening for X, man. It's like a dream come true for me. And I'm going to do it again on December 31st at the Roxy in Hollywood, California. Hitting the big time. We're going to Hollywood. And by the way, both of those shows, the X shows are full band, and the Surf Shop shows are me and a lonely acoustic guitar. Playing my new record, by the way. These performances, all I'm not doing any cover songs. I'm just playing my new record from start to finish. My new record that won't be out till April, but you get a chance to hear sloppy-ass live versions of it come December 18th and December 31st and December 9th, man. Okay, that's that. Let's talk about my favorite website, Zounds.com. Zounds.com, because sometimes you're like, I need a new distortion pedal, or I need some of those JBL speakers I've been hearing so much about, or maybe I need to order a Billy Corgan signature model electric guitar to go woody booty booty boop on. And also, it's Christmas coming up. So maybe there's a musician in your life. Maybe you don't even play anything, but maybe there's a musician in your life that does, and you need to get that person a nice Christmas present. So get on over to Zounds.com. They're going to beat any price. If they don't, they'll beat it. That doesn't make sense. They're going to beat any price, and if they don't, they'll beat it. That's the new Zounds motto, man. Brought to you first. I just made that up. That's a freebie, Zounds. You can have that one for free. All right. Let's get to the interview. Week before last, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Taylor Goldsmith, frontman, lead singer, guitar player, chief songwriter for the band Dawes, which apparently is like the most mispronounced band name in rock and roll history. Who knew? He's a thoughtful guy. We had a great conversation. We talked a lot, got in the weeds on like songwriting and production and growing up in Malibu and how they've had to like hit the road to kind of earn their keep in this crazy business. And this is a guy whose career has run from like being a teenage kid in Malibu obsessed with Steely Dan to writing music and melodies for lost Bob Dylan lyrics with guys like Elvis Costello. Oh, and before I forget, Dawes is hitting the road in support of their latest album, We're All Gonna Die, on January 10th down at the Belly Up in San Diego, and they're going to be touring through the States like into May. They're doing a lot of dates, so check it out. Make sure you go to their website, dawestheband.com, and get those tour dates because they're going to be all over the place. Okay, so Taylor walked into my studio, sat down on the couch, pulled his guitar out of its case and just started noodling away, which I kind of got the impression from hanging with him over the course of this interview that if there's a guitar within his grasp, he's probably going to pick it up and start strumming, because that's just the kind of music lover he is. This is Taylor Goldsmith from Dawes on Walking the Floor. Wow, you almost just started playing a song first, which is not the way we do business around here, pal. That comes at the end.
Make sure my phone's quiet, yeah.
You want to just jump right in?
Sure.
Okay. Well, my first question for you is, how did you know when you named your last record, We're All Gonna Die, that Donald Trump was getting elected? How did you know? You're so prophetic. Were you working inside on his campaign?
I wasn't hoping that would happen, but it is when it was the first song that I wrote for the last batch of tunes, and when we were going over record titles, that was kind of the leader of the charge. We were, because a lot of our records are named after songs, and we've always liked that. And with that one, I thought like this would be a great album title, but it's something that our managers would probably like suggest not doing. And then so I actually was trying to come to terms with that being out of the question and figuring something else out.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, talked to our manager, and he was like, "You should name the record We're All Gonna Die." I was like, wow,
really?
I didn't think you were going to say that. And he's like, it's just, it's coming out in September. This is a weird time. There's a lot of darkness on everyone's mind.
Right.
God, at the time it was more like, God forbid he were to win. But even in the, spirit of, or with the fear of that being a potentiality,
right.
It could be a pretty appropriate album title. So we decided
totally.
to roll with
it's been such a year of fear.
Yeah.
It somehow makes sense. But it struck me as like being out of step with how I think of like you and your band, or just sort of the vibe around your band.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which I like about it.
And I feel like when you listen to the tune, like outside of the context of the song, it's almost ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I wouldn't want anyone to read that and think like, wow, Dawes is like really, dark and sad and really get into it. I mean, it is such a obvious statement and therefore ridiculous and absurd, hopefully a little bit, and especially in the context of the song, which is a song that's more about putting things into perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's not some sort of doomsday,
right. Sure,
dark tune.
The latest album is like a bit of a musical departure, from what your records have sounded like in the past. And I'm wondering, now that it's been out for a little while, and I assume you've been on the road and out there playing it, taking it to the people.
Yeah.
What has the reaction been from your fans? Because I just know that, like, from my own experience in being in a band for a long time, sometimes your most hardcore fans are the least open to bands taking musical left turns.
Yeah. And that's always funny to me, because it's like when you think of any example of a great artist that was able to stick around,
right?
They have to switch it up.
Right.
They have to like redefine what they are,
sure.
and try things that might be uncomfortable initially. To me, the album We're All Gonna Die was relatively a small, leap in terms of what it took for a guy like Paul Simon to make Graceland, or what it took for a band like the Rolling Stones to make Tattoo You, or like those to me sound dramatic. For us, it was still these songs that came from me writing them on acoustic guitar and bringing them to the band, and us thinking, what's a new way to play these songs?
Right.
Which is pretty much how we've approached every record, except just with this record, by making it with our buddy Blake, and by just having...
did Blake produce this one?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And by having a little more ambition in terms of how do we make sure that we feel that this hits us differently when we listen back.
I mean, was that something you guys discussed? Like, was it a planned thing? Like, we're going to kind of make the production element to this a little bit different than what we've done in the past, or did it just sort of happen?
I think it kind of just happened, but also I think even from album one, it's always been for any band,
Sure.
like you want to be able to listen back to something and feel fired up and inspired and feel like you're hearing something that you haven't done before, something that adds to your own musical vocabulary that wasn't, in your arsenal beforehand. And so, when we were making our first records, like just hearing an acoustic guitar and a 3-part harmony was enough to make us feel like, wow, we're doing shit we've never done before. Mm. Whereas, we get to our 5th record and it's like, how do we continue to give ourselves that feeling, give ourselves that thrill? And yeah, there were definitely some fans that were like, oh man, like I want you guys to be this. Like my favorite bands are Avett Brothers,
Judas.
Yeah, like oh yeah, exactly. Like Old Crow Medicine Show and Dawes. And if you guys aren't that way, then I don't like you anymore.
Right.
And as much as I respect anybody for their musical tastes, I'm not that kind of fan. So I would never know how to appeal to a fan like that, or how to play according to someone's criteria like that.
Sure.
To me, like the weirder Neil got, or the weirder Dylan got, or whoever, that was always a new frontier and something that was new and exciting for me. And if and I don't know, I didn't necessarily. It's not always necessarily my favorite stuff by them, but it's still imperative that part exists
and necessary.
Yeah.
Right. So how was that? I didn't realize that Blake had produced your album.
Yeah.
So he used to be in Simon Dawes with you. So how was that working with him again?
It was great. I mean,
have you guys worked together throughout the years on other stuff, or was that the first time?
Kind of indirectly. Like we would get together and show each other songs and give each other pointers.
Yeah.
But yeah, we never worked together. Like we worked on some tunes for our third record, and then we ended up working with a different producer just because of scheduling and whatnot. But we knew we wanted to record with him. It just, we didn't know exactly when that time was going to happen. And then when these songs started coming together, particularly the first song being We're All Gonna Die, like I was saying, we knew like, oh, this would be a really fun batch of tunes for Blake to be involved with. And working with him was great, because Blake, with everything that you hear him do, whether it's Jim James or Alabama Shakes or the new John Legend, he has such a gift. And it's an unconscious one. I don't even think he thinks of it in these terms. Maybe he does. I don't know. But whenever you bring something to him that's at all referential or associative with another time or another genre, that's exactly when he'll want to change courses. Like there was certain riffs and stuff that I had planned for a certain song that reminded me of something off of Thriller. Right. Or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, doesn't it sound like Thriller? Like, wouldn't that be cool? And that's and Blake would be, that's exactly why we shouldn't do that.
Right.
Because, and I feel like most musicians, myself included, we all have the tendency to want to emulate, and we want to like, oh, it sounds like Thriller. Put that on the record.
Awesome.
Yeah. And Blake is so good at always keeping in the forefront of his goals, how do we make sure that we do something that we've never heard before? Whether or not that's true for everyone else, we have no control over.
Right,
but at least for ourselves and our own tastes, how do we make sure that this hits us in a way that nothing else does?
And like, how prepared with your songs do you get before you go into the studio? Do you guys like rehearse them and demo them and really have everything kind of laid out, or do you get in there and flesh them out in the studio?
They're all pretty fleshed out in terms of like words and melody.
Right.
They all are pretty strong on an acoustic guitar.
Right.
But in the past we've taken stuff on tour. We've really had it hammered out. With this record, when it came time to do like pre-production and start working on arrangements, Blake didn't come. Like he was too busy, and he also, and I appreciate this, he didn't want to, because he wanted that invention to be happening in the studio. So we kind of learned these arrangements, and I showed him some of the stuff. I was like, this sounds exciting. But then once we got into the studio, we kind of deconstructed everything and then built it back up. So a lot of things that we thought we had a handle on ended up being different, completely different by the time we started tracking it. But it was still like a band. We still did it all live.
Is that like a comfortable process? Because I asked because the record I just told you I made in the summertime, that's exactly how we did it. Like I did it with that guy Dave Cobb out in Nashville.
Oh, cool.
And he is the same way. He doesn't want you to make a demo. He doesn't listen to it if you do. He wants to sort of be in the moment right when it happens. And I've never made a record like that in my life. And it was so thrilling. Yeah. And I found myself really open to it, but it was like a very new, different sort of letting go of the reins kind of experience, you know?
I mean, I feel like if you're working with someone you really trust and you really admire, then it's great. And not only that, doesn't only go for the producer, but also for the players.
Right.
And I also feel like as the years have gone on, I've tried to kind of, like you said, let go of the reins more and more to really let guys like Griffin who's playing drums, or Wiley playing bass, or Lee playing keyboards, to really feel like their own identity is represented in this band, and not just me saying, here's how the song goes, play it this way. mainly because I don't know how to play their instruments as good as they do. But also because that's what being in a band is all about.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I was going to ask you about that, like how sort of democratic the process is. And, you know, in just about any band, there's like one or maybe two people that sort of emerge as the primary songwriter. I'm assuming in your band it's you.
Yeah.
Along with that goes, you know, you're also the front man,
Right.
sort of the de facto leader, or maybe not de facto, maybe you rule with an iron hand. I don't know. You know what I mean? But
I mean, like, I'm sure there's moments where the rest of the band is frustrated with me because
Right.
I'll say, we should do this.
Right.
And maybe I don't treat it as democratically as I should, but I always try to be mindful of that. And I like to think we do a pretty good job because we are best friends. We hate not being on tour together. We hate not hanging out.
I mean, how is that being in a band with your brother?
It's actually been great. I mean, you know,
historically, rock and roll has a problem with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for some reason, brothers in bands are you
I'm
have to be
the
a nightmare.
Kinks or,
yeah,
you know, Oasis.
Kinks and
Black Crows.
Yeah, it's always bad.
Yeah.
But for some reason, we
like is Thanksgiving comfortable in your house?
Yeah. We're always texting each other like, "What are you up to tonight? What you know, you want to hang out?" So we're very, very lucky. You know, knock on wood, at least for the time being.
Yeah.
And I don't see it changing. I mean, we're pretty good communicators with each other.
Yeah.
And we just come from the same set of. We learn the same tools in terms of communicating and in terms of describing what you feel musically.
Right. Sure.
I'm sorry.
Go
No. With our band, like, I think it's, you know, when it comes to working with Blake and trusting that thing of it happening in the studio, I just sort of, with this record especially, I just was really excited to trust the band and kind of, in some cases, leave the room.
Right.
And then come back and be excited about this new version or this new approach that I'm hearing that I was not expecting. In a way that I imagine certain guys like, you know, the way you hear Leonard Cohen records or where you hear later Bob Dylan records or something where you think like, there's no way this is what they had in mind when these like folk legends were writing this song.
Sure.
But here's how the producer and the band put it together, and they're willing to trust the session, the producer, the band that they put together, and say like, this is going to dictate itself.
Right.
And we all try to subscribe to that sort of spirit.
Did you guys grow up in Malibu? Are you from Malibu?
We moved to Malibu when I was 11 from Glendale.
From Glendale.
Yeah.
Okay.
So always LA.
Right.
And Griff was 6 when we moved to Malibu. So that by that being the place where we went to high school,
right.
It felt the most, you know, formative of anywhere else.
Sure.
I feel much more from Malibu than I do from Glendale.
Do you surf?
I never figured it out.
Well, that's going to hamper my next question. This is the important thing that I was sort of leading us to. Do you have key access to Point Doom? And if so, can I get a copy of that key? Or at least go with you when you go.
I got some friends that are fans of your band, actually, so that would be easy to put
I was hoping
together.
I was developing a new in here, you know? Well, you know, really what I wanted to ask about was... like growing up in a place, you know, Malibu. I mean, LA is obviously dominated by the entertainment industry, but Malibu in particular is you know, heavily, you know, it's entertainment culture and rock and roll culture, whatever, that's steeped in it there. So I'm wondering when you were first starting out, what that was like. Like, were you growing up with the children of other rock and roll people? Like, did that, I guess this is kind of an inarticulate way to get to, did that have an impact on you as a player or even as a music fan?
Well, growing up, meeting Blake at like 10 years old was a true gift. Like that, if I didn't have that, I don't know if I would have been able to be good enough to play music for a living. Right. I think just he was born with this incredible genius, and I felt I was always trying to just kind of glean anything I could off of him. So that was a big part of that. I associate that with my Malibu experience. Another weird part of growing up in Malibu is that it's more in a bubble than I realized at the time. That's probably easy for someone to see who doesn't live there.
Right.
But for me, when there was these bands, White Star and Face Humper and Simon Dawes, and by just playing at the Malibu Inn and having 50 of your friends from school come, we really felt on top of the world, you know, and a lot of people drank the Kool-Aid. Like there were, you know, all due respect, but there were like documentary filmmakers that thought these bands in Malibu were a big enough deal to go around filming.
Right.
When it was really nothing.
Which is a very different experience. I mean, this is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
That's a very different experience than somebody. I mean, even my own growing up, I grew up in Santa Barbara. It's not that far away, but it's far enough away that we didn't have anything. Nobody gave a shit what our band was doing. There were no film crews at our gigs.
And I think and we had to learn a lesson. I think we like when we went to the Roxy for the first time, or the Key Club, or the Troubadour, and no one was there. It was like, oh, this whole Malibu bubble is a real thing, and it's something that we should have noticed a long time ago. That we are starting from the same place that everyone else is, and that what works in Malibu for the 100 people that are paying attention, it doesn't apply. And while I'm grateful for those early shows, and while we had the time of our lives, it was just just a kind of rude awakening as to like, oh, this is up its own ass a little bit.
Was Simon Dawes your first band? Because Simon Dawes started very. You guys were like what, in junior high or something?
Yeah, right? we were in a band before that called Bridge 22.
How old were you when you started playing in bands?
Yeah,
Jesus,
that was
a head start.
We were like 12. We were little kids, but we recorded an EP and we played shows the talent shows and stuff like that. Blake was so far ahead of the game. Like he opened some of our Bridge 22 sets with Eruption by Van Halen. Note for note at like 12 years old.
Really?
So like it was a mishmash of, we had no identity, no idea of what kind of music we wanted to play. It was more like, oh, we learned this Red Hot Chili Peppers song and this Van Halen song, and so we would just kind of throw it all together with a couple originals that were horrible.
And what were you listening to at the time? What were your primary influences?
At the time, it was really it was much more mainstream.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still totally stand by a lot of that stuff. But then once we got to like 15 and 16, and especially because he was learning so much musically and and therefore I was, we discovered Steely Dan. And that became like a 3-year long love affair where we really couldn't listen to anything else.
Right.
Like it was either that or like really heavy jazz. There was I really had no concept of the Stones. I had already, at the time, I thought I'd already digested the Beatles.
Right.
And all I wanted to do was put one more note in every single chord and make sure it was like everything that we did was even cleaner and slicker. And looking back, like, it was good to kind of binge on that because it did really kind of step up our musical chops. Even though a lot of that stuff I look back on, not particularly Steely Dan, I love Steely Dan, but the stuff that we were doing, it's ridiculous. And it was just so concerned with being as smart as we could be. It's a
phase I feel like you pass through.
Yeah, and it was absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
And but because of that, I was sort of on the back, like when everyone was at 16 or 17 discovering that David Bowie spoke for them or what Mick and Keith really represented, I just couldn't understand it, and I was off into this super muso world, so I was late to the party. I didn't really grasp Highway 61 until I was like 20.
Right.
Whereas I feel like everyone else kind of had that moment a little earlier.
Well, how old were you when Simon Dawes got a record deal? And you guys made one record, right?
We made one record.
Maybe a couple EPs or something.
Yeah, a couple EPs and one record.
So how old were you when that was happening?
That record came out, I guess, the 2006, so I was 21.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so for some reason I had it in my head that you were like still in high school when that was happening.
Well,
because I was wondering at what point
Blake was. Like when we were making those EPs, I went to Pepperdine just so we could stay close and still work all the time. And we would record every weekend at our drummer's house, and we just kind of made these scrappy recordings that ended up being those first two EPs. And Blake was finishing high school, and I was in like my first year of college. And then we spent almost a whole year making that first record, and then it finally came out in 2006.
And you guys hit the road? Like, were you also touring? And
we toured those EPs a little bit. Our first tour ever, which is funny, was with Maroon 5.
That's a good tour for a first tour.
Yeah.
I imagine you were playing in front of some roomfuls of people.
Huge audience, like 8,000 people. And their fans are so specific. They're these like young extremely passionate girls that are so
Again, a great opportunity.
Yes. And it really gave us the complete wrong impression of what touring was. Like
Right.
we were. I
This is
remember-
going to be so easy.
Yeah. We played our first show, and I said we're gonna go to this merch booth like in section A23 because the place is so huge.
Right.
And we go there, and we were literally chased to the merch booth and from it. And we thought like this is it. This is what normal touring is. And no one
Right.
told us this part, but this is clearly what's gonna happen
Yeah.
for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And then obviously after that tour, it became clear that that's not the case, and never would happen again, nor should it. But yeah, the Simon Dawes stuff, we didn't do that much touring because I don't know if that many bands really liked us. Like I think some of the guys in Maroon 5 were friends, and then we played some shows with Band of Horses where Blake and I were actually in the band.
Really?
As well as opening.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's kind of how we got the tour. Ben and those guys are so sweet, but
Right.
I don't think they were particularly interested in Simon Dawes. I think it was more like, hey, if you bring us out, you get 2 free members to learn your tunes. And
Right.
at the time, they only had 3.
Right.
And then we played some dates with like Wolf Mother, but only a few. Like we just didn't do much touring.
I guess my question was like, at what point did it go from living in Malibu and struggling and being, up and coming thing to feeling like, okay, we're doing this, man. We're actually pulling this off. We're pros here.
I mean, it with Simon Dawes, I guess, when things are that small, you just kind of grasp onto whatever you can to feel like you are doing what you set out to do. And I guess that's how it should be. But, no one really knew who we were. We weren't selling any records. We were struggling to get any touring. Headlining touring was abysmal. But the fact that we did get those headlining tour, those support slots, and the fact that we could sell like 300 tickets at the Echo in LA, like that, we did really feel like there was at least the beginnings of something
Something
growing.
was percolating.
And we moved to North Hills out in the valley, and then we got this tour opening for Incubus, and that was like 2 months, and it was too long because that's when the wheels came off, and we just we realized like we can't be doing this anymore. And when we got home, Blake moved out. I mean, it was all that was the last kind of stand. But Wiley and I just tried to we were so scared of being 21 years old and worrying like is this it? Am I done with music?
Right.
I didn't get to even start. I remember booking an Acoustic Taylor Goldsmith shows. We didn't have a name. The day after we got home from the Incubus tour, because I knew Dawes was falling apart, and we started playing with Griffin right away, and we started trying to just build something immediately, while Simon Dawes broke up and all that.
I mean, that was actually my next question was, how did Simon Dawes become Dawes? But you just started to answer that. But what were sort of the internal dynamics that drove that?
I think Blake, at the time, we were both extremely frustrated with each other, but like looking back now, we completely understand.
Was it like two songwriters?
No, it wasn't that as
bumping
much
into
as
each
the
other?
fact that Blake was creating a amazing, formidable career as a guitar player and eventually as a producer, and didn't need to go and sit in a disgusting, sweaty van for 8 hours a day and pound the pavement the way that I knew that was my only option.
Right.
And as did Wiley. And so as time went on, he was sort of like, why am I doing this when I could be doing so much more with his talents, and for us, it was like, when's the next tour? And he's like,
Sure.
oh my God, this is so terrifying and awful. And so we part ways mainly because of just career paths. And now he's in a place which is exactly indicative of the issue back then with Simon Dawes, where he's a producer,
Sure.
a guitarist, a songwriter with other people. And yes, he makes his own amazing records, but they're not necessarily what he depends on
Right.
to lead the life he lives.
And
Whereas for us, that's exactly what we do.
It's your bread and butter.
We tour and
Yeah.
we write songs, we make records, and that's our bread and butter. So that was where it came from.
And why did it become like? Why did he take Simon with him, and you guys kept Dawes?
Well, that
what does Simon Dawes mean, and what is that a reference to? Because you're not named Simon Dawes.
Well, we were 15, so it was a dumb idea. We shouldn't have done it. But he was born with the name Simon Matthew Mills, and I was born with the name Taylor Dawes Goldsmith, and neither of those are our legal names anymore. because our parents changed
So
their
it
mind.
is your name.
It was,
Right.
And then my they couldn't make up their mind. So on my social security card, I think it was Dawes, and on my birth certificate, it was Taylor Zachary Goldsmith. And when it came to, I always went by Taylor Dawes Goldsmith because I liked it more. And then when it came time to get my driver's license, they said, if you want your license right now, you have to go with Zachary. But if you wanted to say Taylor Dawes Goldsmith, you're going to need to wait another week. So as any 16-year-old would, I was like, well, then give me Zachary.
Yeah, I got to get it right now.
Yeah.
I got a date. I got to go.
So that was the end of that being my middle name.
So when you fill out the passport form, do you honestly fill out the alias part? Like, do you have an alias? Well, I kind of do have an alias.
No, I don't. But yeah, we thought that was funny to take our two kind of disowned names and make a character out of it. Although all it did was create confusion, which it lasted till this day. I mean,
right.
Simon Dawes was annoying enough because everyone would call me or Blake Simon. But then now it being just Dawes, and we go to, particularly it's terrible in the UK where everyone just assumes we're saying doors because there's no, someone, an English
Now that's something you really don't think about in advance.
Yeah.
How is this going to be pronounced in foreign markets?
Yeah, and an English friend even like kind of broke it down for me, saying like we pronounce pawn as in pawn shop the same way we pronounce porn as in pornography. We just say pawn.
Right.
And with Dawes and doors, it's this, they're not hearing my accent when I say Dawes. They're hearing theirs.
All you have to do is incorporate a few Doors tunes and you're set. And that is a problem solved right
Every
there.
radio interview, someone has to say, like, it's not who you think it is. It's this other band.
Right.
And so
not
it's
Jim Morrison.
So much confusion. And then in Spain, it's Dawes. In Scandinavia, it's Dawes. So it's just like there's no like agreed upon pronunciation outside of the States. If I could go back and have changed the name at this point, for the sake of just convenience, I would have.
So you become Dawes, you make your first proper Dawes record, but it was the one after that was sort of the breakout one. At least that's the one that I first heard, which was Nothing Is Wrong, right? That's the second Dawes record?
Yeah.
Right, so how did things change? Like, that must have been when you really started to feel like you guys were gaining a foothold, because, I mean, it seemed like all of a sudden you guys were everywhere. How was that transition for you?
That was when you're in it, it's so hard to come up for air and see it when the changes and shifts are so gradual.
Right.
Obviously now we feel very lucky to have been able to make 5 records and get to go to these venues we've always dreamed about and play shows. But you always there's always this kind of goal out in front of you that's that you can't quite achieve, and no matter what you do achieve, then it's on to the next thing. But during that time, from North Hills to Nothing Is Wrong, we learned pretty quickly that the music that we made wasn't really geared towards like, well, maybe we'll have some huge top 40 radio hit and be able to exist as this giant band with hits. We learned pretty quickly that we were going to have to grind it out and win a fan over one by one. Right. And watching that happen in that slow, gradual way was something that was exciting. But it never felt like it never hit us overnight or something. There was never this moment of, whoa, things are different now. Right. But I've actually really liked it that way. I feel like when you are the kind of band that can write hits, then you have to continue to. Right. And that seems so terrifying. Like any little bit of success we've had at radio, the idea of having to follow that up would be
daunting.
Yeah.
Right.
And so for us to and I also feel like a fan, the longer a fan takes to invest in you, the longer they're willing to stick with you through whatever you want to put them through. Right. Right. And the ones that show up kind of overnight will also abandon you that fast as well. Right. But yeah, so for us, just kind of trying to be self-aware of the kind of music we made, the kind of band that we are, the fact that, the what it means to be a Tom Petty or the Foo Fighters, like where you can create a hit and then deliver upon it again after kind of setting that bar for yourself, was just, at least up until now, hasn't been our trajectory, hasn't been the way it's worked.
I mean, does that ever enter your mind when you're sitting down and writing a song?
Sure. I mean, I would love to write a hit song, and I think it's really rad when you watch interviews with guys like Tom Petty say, "Yeah, I want to write hits."
Right.
There's such a weird
You're not supposed
stigma,
to be able to,
for young
for certain
songwriters,
kinds of artists.
Yeah, where you're supposed to resist,
right.
writing something commercial. Whereas to me, it's like those are all my favorite songs by those artists. And then also hearing guys like Leonard Cohen say, "I always wanted to write a hit, I just never could." It's cute almost and funny because it's like, you're Leonard Cohen. You don't have to.
Right.
And how did you think
it worked out pretty well?
Yeah. And also, how did you think what you did could ever work next to, Sonny and Cher or whatever,
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, like I would love to be able to play that game, but we never have, we never knew how. So we just did it our way, which is more of that, like creating that live identity and being on the road a lot and really trying to amass a catalog rather than, hoping for that one, rocket ship song.
Well, it's interesting. The guy that played me your second record, which was like the first time I heard you, was my friend Sam Jones. Like, our kids go to school together.
Cool.
And this was like,
Sam.
it was a few years ago, so our kids were a little younger, but he played me some songs on that record. So I think maybe he made a video for you guys or something.
He did.
And then I'm assuming that relationship kind of ultimately led to the Basement Tapes
Continued
continued
he was
movie
a big
and all that.
champion for me.
Just to be included in something with that carries that kind of weight. I mean, you're writing music and melodies to Bob Dylan's lyrics. Like, what a heavy thing for a songwriter. But how did that feel? And I know you guys have been like, embraced by some, Jackson Browne and some people that I'm assuming you are a fan of.
Yeah.
What does that do for you? It's like how does that? There must be. I know you probably can't say it out loud, but there had to be like an internal like,
yeah.
This is great.
It's sort of like, and I mean this. I don't mean to make this sound bad, but like for a band like us, who's admittedly a smaller band, in a way, it's sort of like being on the bench on a great basketball team,
right?
And you're never getting minutes, but you're on the team. You get to play.
Right.
You're doing the shoot arounds. And then one day, like the coach comes and is like, "We're down by 20, and you gotta win this fourth quarter for us, and it's up to you."
Get in there, Goldsmith.
Exactly, and that's kind of how it felt doing the Basement Tapes thing. Of like, I've never had this opportunity to work alongside Marcus Mumford, Jim James, Elvis Costello, produced by none other than T-Bone.
Right.
And it's like, okay, now I have to come correct. I can't be the inexperienced new guy. I have to show that I belong here because I was invited here.
Did you know all those folks prior to?
I knew Jim and Marcus.
Starting? Okay.
I never had met Elvis, and I was a crazy huge fan.
Sure.
And I never met T-Bone. Again, a huge fan of his as well. And but yeah, Marcus and Sam were the reasons why I was there. Marcus, we had toured with. That's where we hung out last. Was
sure.
Mumford and Sons show.
I still have my my water bottle from that. Actually, I use it every time I go play
all
soccer.
Sorts of gifts.
Gentlemen of the road.
Yeah.
I hate to admit it, and maybe I shouldn't, but I just will. Do you remember how the dressing rooms were all decorated really cool?
Yeah,
They had, little tchotchkes all over the place, and there was this amazing I don't know what it is, like beaver skin cowboy hat that was in a room, and it fit my head perfectly, and I just took it and stuck it right into my wardrobe case. I was like, hope nobody notices that.
I mean, I feel like those guys, like that's what they're hoping for.
Right.
I mean, at least I hope so. I
It
mean,
lives on
why
in
leave
my
it out there for
wardrobe,
us
yeah.
otherwise? Yeah, that's awesome. But,
well, I was going to say about the movie, one of my favorite, as a musician, and as somebody that has been in bands, for most of my life, I think one of my favorite elements of watching that movie was to see all these different people who are in any of their given bands the primary songwriter.
Yeah.
And then forced into a collaborative effort.
Right.
So I'm wondering how that was. I mean, it sounds to me from what you've already said about your band that you're pretty used to collaborating anyway, but how was that experience for you?
Well, it was cool because it I feel like it was a testament to the willingness to collaborate that leaders of bands often have. Like there was so much support of one another and so much trust in where someone else wanted to take it.
Right.
Like when Elvis was at the helm and it was an Elvis song that we were working on that day, he called the shots. And all we wanted to do was help create his vision.
Right.
And that went for all five of us. There was in the movie, they show pretty much the only bump in the road that we had. Every song that we set out to do, we recorded.
Right.
And then with Rhiannon, there was this one song that we ended up getting.
Right.
But that was the one time where we were like, let's walk away from this. That never happened.
Right.
Except for that one time. But even in that one scene, you can see all 5 of us just trying to like help her get what she wants.
Right.
Like, oh, well, we could try it like this. And then she's like, no, it's not quite it. And then Jim, we could try it like this. And all 4 of us were troubleshooting for the sake of helping someone realize their vision without taking over, without making it like, well, I know this would work, without being a bullshit leader of a band that was some dick that was like, hey, let me do what I do.
See, this is your opportunity to dish the dirt on like if there was one guy that wasn't playing ball, we can make that clear now.
Yeah, it really was so awesome to never feel that once, to just feel so supported and whether it's Marcus on drums or Elvis or Jim on bass, or everyone was willing to like not be the guy.
Right. Were there any like relationships or friendships or even artistic relationships that were sort of born out of that experience that had endured? Like, have you done anything with those guys since then?
We had toured with the Jacket, but I wasn't.
Are you going to Elvis Costello's house on Sundays for barbecues and stuff like that?
Well, we became good pals. I mean, like we like Jim and I became a lot closer even though we knew each other, but I didn't know Elvis and we got really close too. And he's so amazing because, he's there. You hear these stories about him recording records where he decides like, oh, I like that producer and I like this band. Like I don't have any songs, but what do you say, 2 weeks? And then all of a sudden he has 15 songs ready to record. And you can feel that in a conversation or in an email. Like his emails are gorgeous. They're super long and they're so detailed and so generous with him giving his thought to every little thing he does. Right. And it all starts to make sense as to why he's who he is. It's just because he cares so deeply about every word that comes out of his mouth. Yeah. And so knowing him has been a real inspiration and been a real eye opener of like what that class of songwriter looks like.
Sure. Talk about a guy that's changed shapes over the years.
Yeah. I mean, he has almost as many records as Bob Dylan, and his first was in 1977, I think. Right. So the fact that he's been able to do that much great work is overwhelming. And he played Newport last year, and we were playing there too. And so I emailed him like, if you need a band, let's do some songs. So he, sent all these tunes he wanted to do together, and he was really open to suggestions. We actually did a really true to the record version of Every Day I Write the Book. Really? And he had said he didn't really want to do that one, but once we started playing it, he's like, oh, this sounds so good. We'll do this. And then he emailed me like last week saying that his band now, for the first time since that song was recorded, now does the record version of that song. Really? Because of all of us hanging out at Newport.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's so cool. So what's next? Like your record just came out, 2-3 monts ago, something like that. It's pretty recent, so I imagine you're still in the full-on like tour cycle. Right. Thing.
Well, we this was the first time that we have done shows, but this was the first time where we put off the heavy touring. We just announced a few days ago all the touring for. It's going to start in late January. We're going to have like 50 dates, all over the North America between January and April. It's going to be pretty heavy, but it's going to be really fun. And that's kind of all for now. That's what's on the books. And I mean, for me, it's always so funny. Like every record we finish, I stop thinking about it because otherwise I would always think like we should have done that differently. We should have done that differently. I don't really listen to it anymore. I'm very proud of it, and I'm so excited to really play the songs at shows, but now it's a matter of thinking about the next batch of songs. Yeah. My heroes are all the ones like Elvis, like where there's just so much work. And so we really want to be able to look back and have a lot to represent what Dawes is.
That's exciting to be still have all the touring for your record ahead of you and to be thinking like that. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Well, it sounds like maybe somewhere over the course of next year we might be maybe we'll run into each other in a distant land, so. and maybe I'll refer to your band as Doors. Yeah, because it might be culturally appropriate wherever we are. We'll see.
Exactly.
Well, thanks, dude. Do you want? Can you play us a song? I would love that.
Sure.
Cool. Are you loud?
No, No, it'll be that loud.
Okay.
And I'll sing quiet. Right. Quit talking to God if your prayers don't get answered, or if you don't exactly notice when they do. Quit taking the jobs that rob you of your powers so you can buy more shit you don't have time to use. Quit hanging around in this air-conditioned town where your life is lived out hunched over your phone. You're gonna have to quit everything until you find one thing you won't. Quit living in the past if all you end up doing is practicing the apologies you won't make. Quit filling up your glass if it's mixing and it's churning of the feelings you were trying to escape. Quit committing these sins, then absolving them again, as if it matters when you do or when you don't. You're gonna have to quit everything until you find one thing you won't. Quit turning to words and putting pen on paper if it feels like you're just putting black on white. Quit telling these girls your ideas about forever when you only plan to know them for the night. Quit wasting my time, because pretty soon you'll find it's the only thing of value that we own. You're gonna have to quit everything until you find one thing you won't. Quit trying to act like the world breaks into facts when life itself is swimming through your bones. You're gonna have to quit everything until you find one thing you won't. You're gonna have to quit everything until you find one thing you won't.
Yeah.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Then our host bust out of his bedroom with his glasses slightly bent.
Yeah, that was Taylor Goldsmith from Dawes doing an acoustic version of Quitter from their latest album, We're All Gonna Die. Like I said in the intro, Dawes is hitting the road for quite a while, starting January 10th down at the Belly Up in San Diego, and they're going to be on the road all the way through May at least, if not beyond that. So make sure you get over to dawestheband.com, get those tour dates, or you can follow them on Twitter at @dawestheband. That's it for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you go to iTunes and subscribe to Walking the Floor. You can listen to all the old episodes, leave us some comments, reviews, whatever you want to do. It's all there. iTunes, Walking the Floor. We'll see you next week. Adios, amigos!